ያለፈ ኢትዮጵያዊነት የሌለን ሰዎች ዝም ብለን ኢትዮጵያ እያለን እያወራን ብቻ የምንኖር እዚህ ንግግር እንዲሁም ደግሞ በብፁዕ አባታችን እውነተኛ ኢትዮጵያዊነት ልንማርበት ልንለወጥበት ኢትዮጵያዊ በመሆናችን አምነን ስለ አንድ ኢትዮጵያ ስለሚለው እንድንኖር እንድንሰራ በእውነት አምላካችን እግዚአብሔር ያግዘን። ብፁዕነታቸው በእውነት ኢትዮጵያ ተወልደን አድገን ለመጣን ሰዎች ብቻ ሳይሆን ተስፋነታቸው በዚህ ሀገር ተወልደው ላደጉ በዚሁ ለኖሩ በዚሁ ለተማሩ ኢትዮጵያውያንም ለሌሎችም ጭምር ነው። ይህ ሲመሰከር ሲነገር የሰነበተ ነው እና አሁንም ደግሞ በመስመር ላይ በእውነት በሎስ አንጀለስ ድንግል ማርያም ቤተክርስቲያን ወጣቶችን በማስተማር በዲቁና በማገልገል እዚህ ሀገር ለተወለዱ ልጆች አራያ በመሆን ወንጌልን በማስተማር በእውነት ሀብተ ልሳን የተሰጠው አማርኛ፣ ግዕዝ፣ ዕብራይስጢ እንዲሁም ደግሞ ቋንቋው ነው እንግሊዝኛን በደንብ አድርጎ የሚናገረው እንዲሁም ደግሞ በእኛ ቤተክርስቲያን ለተወሰነ ጊዜ ቆይቶ በእውነት አሁን ድረስ ከልብ ለመናገር እዚህ ሀገር የተወለዱ በእኛ ቤተክርስቲያን የሚገለገሉ ልጆች የሚናፍቁት በእውነት ዲያቆን ሄኖክ መቼ ይመጣል እያሉ የሚጠይቁኝ ልጆች አሉ እና ዲያቆን ሄኖክ በመካከላችን ስለ ብፁዕ አባታችን ምን ያክል በዚህ ሀገር ለተወለዱ ልጆች ተስፋ ብርሃን እንደነበሩ ለመናገር በመካከላችን ይገኛል። በቀጥታ ወደ ዲያቆን ሄኖክ እንሄዳለን።
አይኮተከ ሆየ መሪጌታ እርሱ ያውቃል። Your beatitudes, blessed bishops, archbishops, Barnabas and Peter of Southern California and New York. It's a pleasure to be here and to commemorate and remember our beloved father, the Archbishop Melketsédiq, with everyone. I have just a few words I'll share and then I'll be out, being aware of how long the program has been thus far. I first came to know Abuna Melketsédiq, his beatitude, 8 years ago when I began teaching in the Sunday school program at the Virgin Mary's Church in Los Angeles for the first time. And in that Sunday school, the curriculum that we have used for as long as I have been a part of it, for these 8 years and for longer than that, maybe a decade or more, comes from one of the many books of his that have been mentioned. Qasis Taganu, Mamherulukal, many of you before me have mentioned how many books, just how prolific of an author Abuna Melketsédiq was. Some 22 books, as far as I know. It's the only book of his. It was translated into English and it's simply titled On the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. It is the basis of our curriculum, the basis of our Sunday school, looking at how to teach the Bible to children while following along with the church calendar of feasting and fasting. As Marigita Ursuakal mentioned, in 2017, although I had been visiting once or twice a year over a period of some 5 years, I had an opportunity while I was living in Merced and Turlock in the Central Valley where I was close enough. And with the help of a lot of people, I would make it as often as I can, almost every weekend, to Oakland, Madhani Alim, where I was able to serve with the Sunday school there. And I got to ask Abuna Melketsédiq so many different questions and learn from him on so many occasions. And he was always jolly. He was always humorous. But especially when I began teaching his children regularly, I remember even in the midst of his sickness and illness, he would come by during the Saturday program and he would ask us questions. And when I say us, he would ask me as the teacher, and then he would ask the students, and he would really drill us. And so it's reminiscent of the memory that his beatitude, Abu Pedros was sharing with us earlier, of decades ago, of when he himself was being examined by Abu Melketsédiq at the Paul Seminary in Addis Ababa so many moons ago. Abu Melketsédiq has two paradoxical features that have been mentioned already today, but I want to emphasize. He was the great modernizer or the great modernist. At the same time, he was the great traditionalist. He's the great modernist in that you can trace back to Holy Trinity Cathedral in Addis Ababa the revitalization or creation of the mazambaran, the choir members as we know it, especially women, and of homilies or of sermons or of teaching. For 1,000 years or greater, in the church, we would read the word of God. And as Abuna Petro said, sometimes people would skip that and go to the melody, and we'd go home. But he instituted in the 20th century an idea of after Qaddasi, meeting again with a select few people, usually the youth, preparing the misbah, which is the psalm chant, preparing the wangel, which is the gospel to be read, and having a whole nother session dedicated to teaching, dedicated to preaching, dedicated to homilies, dedicated to sermons. In that same post-liturgical setup, he established for the first time choir members, even women choir members that are different than the Debtara class or the typical choir member class that we find in our liturgical rubrics. Choir members as we know them today, the modern ones, can all be traced back to Abuna Melketsédiq. Preaching and teaching in our church can be traced back to Abuna Melketsédiq. At the same time, with these innovations, amongst his many books, he has written about the origin of the Misakir Betwach, of the houses of certification. He's named 3 of them. In southern Gondar, there are 2, one in Bethlehem, one in Zura Abba, one for the Digwa, which is the book of spiritual songs or hymns, a hymnal for songs throughout the year, but especially a spiritual song or a hymn dedicated to every Sunday of the year. Then you also have Zimmari, which is another book of Saint Yared, which is dedicated to spiritual songs and hymns, specifically during the time of Qurban or during the time of Holy Communion, when the church is receiving his holy flesh and his precious and honorable blood. Then you have Mawasa'it, which you can call the Book of the Dead. These are hymns and spiritual songs done during our funerary rites or our funerary services, during wakes, sometimes in people's homes, but also at the church building itself. And finally, Devrabbai, where in Tigray, we have the elite school of the Eucharistic liturgy, the main worship service that most faithful are accustomed to. The big message, if any, that I can pass along, and it's been mentioned by everyone else, and I'm so glad that the same one Spirit is working through us, is that you need to try and read all of his books. If you cannot read his books, find someone who knows Amharic and either have them translate it for you or have them read it aloud to you and explain to you. There's a lot of wisdom to be found in his writings. And finally, since he gave so much focus to the Word of God, I'll leave you with this. His birth name or given name for a long time was Habta Maryam, the gift, the riches, the wealth of Mary. And it's a beautiful regular name, beautiful given name, beautiful baptismal name. But when he became a bishop, he got the name Melketsédiq or Melketsédiq, and it's not without accident. I'll give you homework to read Hebrews chapter 5 through 7, and I'll read Hebrews 7, verses 1 to 3 for you. This Melketsédiq was king of Salem, priest of God Most High, who met Abraham when he was returning from the slaughter of the kings, and who blessed him. Moreover, Abraham gave a 10th part of all to this Melketsédiq. By the interpretation of his name, he is first king of saving justice, and also king of Salem, that is, king of peace, without father, mother, or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. He was made like the Son of God and remains a priest for all times. وسبحات لإግዚአብሔር.
ወንድማችን ዲያቆን ሄኖክ ከልብ አድርገን እናመሰግናለን። በእውነት አማርኛውን በደንብ ስለምትሰማው በአማርኛው ለማመስገን ብዬ ነው። እግዚአብሔር ያክብርልን፣ እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን። በዚህ ቤተ ክርስቲያንም በአንዳንድ ሁኔታዎች ተመልሰ መጥተህ ከልጆቻችን ጋር አንዳንድ የምንሰራቸውን ነገሮች የብፁዕ አባታችንን ስራ ለማስቀጠል እንደምትረዳን እና እንደምታግዘን ተስፋ አለን። ቶሎ ለመጨረስ ሰዓታችን ለመጠቀም ከዚህ በመቀጠል